Under the harsh studio lights of the Fox News special debate, Jasmine Crockett stood wearing a navy blue suit and pants. Clear against the American flags in the background. The Congresswoman's first term from. As the camera focused on her calm face, Texas held her microphone carefully. The conservative person across from her. With his trademark frown deepening, radio giant Mark Levin leaned forward forcefully. 4 times in only 3 minutes, he interrupted her in the middle. "You have no idea what you're discussing." The studio echoed with the boom of Levin's voice. "Not all constitutions are. Democrats can choose from a buffet. If you don't mind, Mr. Levin, I would want to." Crockett tried, her voice hard but controlled, "Finish just one." "I'm not." Levin stabbed her with his finger and yelled, "Finished." "This is precisely the issue with your party. You speak concerning democracy, but you're not even allowing others to talk." The crowd whispered as Crockett's face was displayed on the split screen. She didn't recoil. Rather, a subtle. She reached for a folder that had stayed closed next to her during the intense conversation, and a smile appeared on her lips. The Harvard-educated attorney and the former public defender appeared to make a choice at that same moment, as she gently opened her eyes and met Levin's. "The folder." Calmly, she said, "Since you won't let me talk, maybe you'll let these materials do the talking." Cable news would be affected by what transpired over the next 90 seconds. Political circles and social media for months to come. Mark Levin, the massive broadcaster with millions of loyal listeners, were unaware that his incessant disruptions had made the setting for what many would later refer to as the most spectacular live-streamed self-destruction of a media career. Television. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel before we delve further into this startling confrontation. For further political drama and analysis that isn't available in the mainstream media. You won't want to miss what follows next. Next in this dramatic confrontation between a titan of the mainstream media and a Mark Levin, a rising figure in Congress, had made his fortune on moral outrage. At age 66, the former Reagan an administration insider had become a conservative media powerhouse, and his syndicated radio program. Every day, millions of people tuned into the Mark Levin Show. His Fox News show. With 9 best-selling books and a reputation as the outstanding one, Life, Liberty, and Levin continuously received high ratings. Levin was renowned for his aggressive approach and was regarded as untouchable in conservative circles by his admirers. Levin had a career of yelling down opponents with his dramatic outbursts, and he was known for his combative style, interrupting visitors and calling opposing viewpoints worthless, as well as engaging in passionate rants over constitutional originalism, the risks of progressivism. This strategy had been effective for years, solidifying his reputation as a conservative kingmaker whose support was sought after by Republican contenders around the country. Levin had arrived that night expecting to win easily against a somewhat unknown opponent in Congress. The subject, presidential privilege and congressional oversight, constitutional. Levin believed he was the last authority on matters, and the producer had informed him that Congresswoman Crockett had a solid legal background, but Levin waved his hand away the worry. "She has served in Congress for. I've spent 40 years studying the Constitution, and Jasmine Crockett embodied every principle." 5 minutes? After years of criticizing, the Texas Democrat had risen to 42. Swiftly moving up the political ladder. She graduated from the University of Houston Law Center with a law degree. Had established himself as a strong public defender and civil rights lawyer prior to being elected to the. In 2020, she was elected to the Texas House of Representatives, and 2 years later, she was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives from the 30th Congressional District of Texas, in contrast to many. When Crockett entered politics, she didn't give up her legal practice. Instead, she rapidly gained assignments to the House Oversight and Judiciary Committees, where her incisive inquiries of witnesses had already produced moments that went viral. Her capacity to. She became well known on social media after converting difficult legal ideas into understandable language, where videos of her. Millions of people watched committee performances on a regular basis, but tonight's dispute was more than 2 political figures. The stakes were considerably higher. A contentious CEO had started the debate. A presidential edict that many said went beyond constitutional bounds. As a member, Crockett had participated in the legal study of the decision as a member of the Judiciary Committee, and Levin had spent the previous week referring to the directive as the greatest unconstitutional act in contemporary times on his radio show, claiming that Crockett and other Democrats are constitutionally ignorant for defending. Fox News's producers had anticipated a heated but insightful discussion between a constitutional Instead, they received something that no one else had, a conservative and a progressive lawyer who became a congresswoman. As expected, Levin had taken over the conversation from the start, talking over Crockett. Repeatedly. Sean Hannity, the moderator, has only made modest attempts to build equilibrium, letting Levin steer the conversation. During the first 10 minutes, Crockett had tried to reply with legal reasoning and policy considerations, but each time she got traction, she was interrupted. What neither Levin Hannity didn't aware that Crockett had brought more than just talking points, she had brought revenue. There was a noticeable sense of tension in the studio as staff members looked at one another as Levin's interruptions increased. Increasingly frequent, and Crockett's patience became apparent. The split screens effectively displayed the disparity. Crockett, red-faced and passionate, remained calm but grew more determined. Hannity stated, trying to reset the system, something had to give. Let's get back to the constitutional question. Congresswoman Crockett, you have 30 seconds to answer to Levin's fourth interruption in the conversation, but before she could. Levin spoke up once more, but the Congresswoman and her colleagues don't comprehend the fundamental division of powers created by the founders. Had they read Federalist No. 47, which I suspect they did, Crockett made the action that would alter everything at this precise moment, reaching for the folder. Mr. Levin. With unexpected firmness, Crockett interrupted his tirade to say, in the 5 minutes we've been on air, you've interrupted me 12 times. I've given you a chance to talk without being interrupted. I believe you should show the same consideration to viewers, Levin said, turning to face Hannity. It's absurd, Sean. I'm attempting to teach the audience about fundamental ideas, and she's whining about interrupts. I'm pointing out a pattern, not complaining, Crockett said calmly. Pattern that appears to contradict your stated regard for rational discussion. The studio became silent, and even Hannity looked too uncertain of what to do, torn between his friendship with Levin and the clear imbalance in the conversation. Levin leaned back and waved dismissively, saying, you know what? Let's. Crockett nodded, listening to the Congresswoman's insights on constitutional law. Thank you. As I was attempting to. Furthermore, the aforementioned presidential action is well within the bounds of established precedent, as the Supreme Court has often held. Levin, unable to control himself, interrupted, that's absolutely untrue. The type of overreach that the court has never sanctioned is precisely the type of false information that Mr. Levin. That's the 13th interruption, Crockett continued, her voice much firmer. I'm starting to believe you're scared too. Levin's face reened as the remark touched a chord. Let me finish an idea. More as he inclined toward his microphone. Fearful? I've argued with presidents and judges of the Supreme Court. Candidates. A first-term congresswoman who is ignorant of fundamental constitutional law is not something I'm terrified of. With a challenge in her tone, Crockett said, then why don't you let me finish a sentence? If my arguments are as feeble as you say, wouldn't it help you to listen to them completely before answering? Hannity, noticing the growing Congresswoman, please finish your point. And Mark, let's keep this civil. Tension, tried to step in. Before answering, let's let her finish. Crockett gave a grateful nod. As I was saying, the clear guidelines for executive action in this area have been set by the Supreme Court. In Youngstown Sheet and 2 v. Sar, Justice Jackson described 3 possible presidential power structures. Executive orders undoubtedly fall within the first category, in which the president takes action using the explicit or implicit Congress's approval, which the court has continuously maintained is lawful. She waited for the seemingly inevitable interruption, and when it didn't happen right away, she went on. Levin, who could no longer control himself, screamed, furthermore, in the 2020 scenario of this is preposterous, you're portraying the Youngstown case in its entirety. Your thesis is not at all supported by Jackson's concurrence. When politicians who have never truly studied constitutional law begin tossing around, this is what occurs. Supreme Court decisions they don't comprehend. Crockett's face was captured on tape, not one of rage or despair but also a sense of fulfillment, as though Levin had stepped straight into a trap she had meticulously set. Mister, that brings us to the 14th interruption, Levin, she observed coolly. And it's fascinating that you just validated my criticism of your debating strategies, but more significantly, you simply made a serious mistake regarding the concurrence of Justice Jackson. I've penned whole chapters about the Youngstown case, Levin retorted, raising his voice. I don't require a lecture from a person who practiced constitutional law and was a federal judge's clerk. Crockett broke her own rule against interruptions and interjected, saying, Mr. Levin, regarding your experience on the radio, I've really presented arguments in federal court regarding constitutional issues, and your statement regarding Justice Jackson's concurrence is provably wrong. There was silence in the studio. Hannity herself appeared uneasy as the camera recorded their confrontation. Levin's expression had changed from one of rage to anything less certain. That's the issue with interrupting Mr. Levin all the time, Crockett added, raising her voice. Yet strict. It occasionally keeps you from hearing information that could help you avoid blunders on national. Dr. Crockett pulled out a single document from the folder in front of her at this very time. As she held up a paper with highlighted writing, it zoomed in. This is Justice. I brought Jackson's concurrence in Youngstown because I thought maybe we could talk about it. Do you want me to read the section that refutes your claim? Levin started reading before she could reply. When the president takes action, either explicitly or implicitly, his power is greatest when he has the approval of Congress, since it encompasses all he has on his own plus everything that Congress can assign. This executive order was issued using the authority granted by statute, particularly authorized by Congress in Section 42 of the 2022 Infrastructure Security Act. Levin's face had changed. The blustery assurance was giving way to the growing understanding that that's a selective reading, he said, suggesting that he might be outmatched. Muttered, obviously unsteady. You're not taking into account Jackson's analysis's entire context. I would be delighted to. If you'll let me talk without interruption, we can talk about the whole context, Crockett said. Do you want to, Mr. Levin, try that strategy? Hannity was captured on camera looking off-screen in the direction of a producer. The section was deviating greatly from the expected storyline, in which the network star Levin is obviously defensive. Hannity declared that we needed to take a brief rest. More of this heated discussion between congressmen when we return. Mark Levin and Crockett discuss whether the president's executive order is constitutional. Well, when the cameras pan. The studio was still uncomfortable as they left for the ad. There was the shuffling of Levin. Papers, his usual self-assurance clearly trembling. Crockett sat opposite him, seeming unfazed by the confrontation, casually going over the notes in her binder. What the audience missed during the Levin was leaning toward a producer during the commercial break, whispering aggressively. Later, crew members would say that he requested that Crockett's microphone be modified and that the segment format be altered because she's being too hostile. Hannity tried to restart the conversation when the show resumed with a gentle inquiry regarding Lean's most recent book. It was an open attempt to assist his friend in regaining footing, but Crockett was determined to keep the substantive discussion on course. She respectfully interrupted, Sean, if I may. Yet forcefully. Instead of a book promotion, viewers tuned in for a conversation about constitutional oversight. I would. If it's okay, I'd like to go back to Mr. Levin's assertions regarding executive power. Hannity glanced for a second. The pushback shocked him, but he nodded. You can do it, Congresswoman. Thank you. Crockett had turned back to Lean and replied, You, Mr. Levin. On your show, you have stated time and time again that this executive order reflects an unparalleled breach of the separation of powers, to use a quotation. The Congressional Research Service, however, you've probably read the analysis, which concluded that this order's reach is really more constrained than that of comparable measures taken by the former government, which you supported with your program. How can these positions be reconciled? Levin was aware that the query was specifically worded to draw attention to the contradiction. His answer was prompt and foreseeable disruption. That is an utterly unjust description of my stance. The situations have completely changed, and Mr. Levin Crockett's patience are clearly wearing thin. That's 15th interruption. More significantly, though, you're dodging the query. The legal analysis carried out by impartial experts demonstrate that you are selective in your fury. You supported more extensive executive action where it was consistent with your politics, then denounce more limited action when it fails. Levin's visage was captured on video, hardening as he became aware that his typical strategies were failing. Instead of retreating, he intensified, raising his voice to the yelling level that his radio audience would be familiar with. This is precisely why doesn't Congress do anything, he yelled. Rather of dealing with the content, like a debate scorekeeper, you're counting interruptions. The American people are worthy of better than these. Crockett's remark was quiet but incisive. Political games. The American people are entitled to a meaningful conversation in which all viewpoints are heard. You're not playing a game, Mr. Levin. It's simple. Regard for democratic dialogue. Viewers were obviously moved by the interaction. Social media was already Twitter with footage of the altercation and trending hashtags like Let Her Speak and Levin's Lecture. The Hannity was receiving signals from the control room that the piece was generating a lot of internet activity, which is exactly what the network desired, albeit possibly not in the manner they had expected. Perceiving both risk and possibility, Hannity made another attempt to take charge. Let's concentrate on the particular constitutional issue at hand. Where precisely does the Constitution draw the boundary on executive authority, in your legal view, Congresswoman Crockett? Power in this region? It was a reasonable query that made for a fruitful conversation. Crockett started to respond, describing how executive authority has historically been interpreted in relation to national security issues. For half a minute, she presented a convincing legal case without pause. Then, as expected, Levin was unable to resist. This is the worst kind of constitutional revisionism. He interrupted. This view would horrify the founders. In particular, they. Crockett stated, we built our system to stop precisely this type of Mr. Levin. There was a sharpness to her voice that had not been there before. Interruptions 16 are that. And you're trying to talk now? Respecting the founders without recognizing that constitutional academics from various political backgrounds have differing opinions on this problem. She opened her folder once more and took out a few sheets. Actually, I've included quotations from conservative legal experts, such as former Republican administration officials who back the if this executive order is constitutional. She held up the papers as the camera zoomed in. Michael, the professor. Just last week, Stanford law professor McConnell, who was appointed to the federal court by President George W. Bush, wrote that this executive orders are well within the bounds of the president's recognized authority. And Michael Mekassis, the former attorney general, said that the constitutional power is obvious, even though I may not agree with the policy. Lebanon appeared sincere. Startled by these references, he realized that his usual tactic of discounting dissenting opinions as radical leftism wouldn't work. Opposing this kind of orthodox legal authority. Those were the statements. Are misconstrued, he stumbled, obviously improvising. Therefore neither Mekassis nor McConnell has the complete specifics regarding the implementation. I've included the whole quotations and Crockett said that citations should be supplied so that visitors could confirm themselves. More significantly, however, Mr. Levin, this proves that rational constitutional experts, even conservatives, can have differing opinions on these intricate matters. The assurance with which you claim to be unconstitutional or rubbish because they disagree with you fails to capture the complexity of constitutional law. The momentum had obviously changed. Known for his blustery self-assurance, Levin seemed more defensive. His interruptions had backfired, giving the impression that he was intimidating instead of authoritative. Every time he interrupted Crockett, she created a sharp difference in their methods by coolly calling out the conduct and getting back to the important topics. As the broadcast came to a finish, Hannity made one final attempt to offer his friend a chance to get back on track. In your works, Mark, you've written a lot on executive power. What do you consider to be the main point? Is being ignored in this conversation? Levin had the ideal opportunity to give one of his famous monologues. With part of his confidence back, he leaned forward. The primary concern in this case, which the Congresswoman either fails to comprehend or deliberately disregards the Constitution. Sean and Crockett seamlessly interjected at the time check. About 30 seconds remain. And about 70% of this segment has been spoken by Mr. Levin. Maybe I could have the last say because I haven't got much time to finish thinking things out. The request made sense, particularly considering the disparity that viewers had clearly seen. Hannity nodded despite her uneasy expression. That's reasonable. You have the final say, Congressman. Thank you, she responded, turning to face the camera. Debates about the Constitution demand nuance, tolerance for diverse interpretations, and, most all, the capacity to hear different points of view. When we simplify these intricate matters to shouting, we undermine the very Constitution we say we are defending by interfering with games and matches. I hope viewers will investigate these topics on your own instead than depending on someone who asserts complete knowledge in fields where experts can legitimately disagree. It was a calm, fair judgment that established her as the adult in the room. This was a sharp contrast to Levin's rants and interruptions. Hannity started to conclude the segment. Levin became enraged and said, "This is ridiculous," loud enough to be heard. Crockett saw him say, "You haven't let me make a single point without, for his microphone to pick up her introduction." Mr. Crockett's voice abruptly took on a sharpness that demanded attention as she said, "Levin. That's interruption 17, and I think it perfectly illustrates what's happened to political discourse in this country." She swiveled slightly to look at Levin and the camera. "You've made a living talking for years. Over visitors, ignoring knowledge, and establishing an echo chamber where your voice is the only one heard. You've persuaded your audience that shouting is a sign of power and interrupting someone is a sign of strength. The studio was utterly quiet, even. Since the section time had officially over, Hannity appeared hesitant of whether to interrupt her. Crockett went on. Here's what's going on right now, millions of people are watching you. Her remarks were measured but devastating. Incapable of responding to a first-term congresswoman's basic legal points without using. They're watching you reject conservative legal scholars because of your interruptions and insults. They are seeing your desire for a platform while declining to expand the scope of their analysis, which does not align with your story. Levin's face was flushed. How dare you treat others with the same decency? Crockett calmly observed, you teach me about that's interruption 18. And I'm not. I'm making an observation that viewers can confirm with their own eyes and ears, she said, lecturing Mr. Levin. You mentioned lecturing, so I have something fascinating here, a transcript. I went inside her folder one last time and took out a sheet of paper. From your 9-minute explanation of the significance of Article 3 standing on your radio show last month. Criteria in federal courts. She took a moment to process the importance before saying, the issue is you. Utterly misunderstood the fundamental test, saying that plaintiffs must demonstrate legal standing, judicial appropriateness, and actual harm, all of which are not the criteria set by the Supreme Court. The real test calls for redressability, causality, and actual harm. As she went on, the camera captured Levin's face shifting from rage to something that looked like panic. Mr. Levin, this isn't a minor error. Something like Constitutional Law 101. All first-year law students gain knowledge. However, you confidently gave millions of people this false information. Listeners who believe you to be an authority on constitutional law. She put down the transcript and turned to face Levin. Your enthusiasm for the Constitution is undeniable, but it cannot replace accuracy and volume. Is not a replacement for knowledge. Sensing catastrophe, Hannity at last stepped in. Crockett wasn't done, but we have to finish this up. One last point, if I may. Mr. Levin's reputation has been established as a constitutional purist who is aware of the nobody knows the founders' intentions better than they do. However, when asked about particular legal principles and precedents, he uses disruption instead of interaction. She faced Levin immediately. The better champions for the Constitution are needed than those who profess to value it but don't take it seriously. Complexity. The American people are entitled to better than public figures who cover over important issues with volume. Flaws in their reasoning. Crockett swung her last blow aimed straight at the camera. I hope that people at home would consider what they've seen this evening and consider whether this is the degree of. We want our democracy to have a dialogue? Are insults and interruptions a stand-in? For substance? Or do we merit more from those who profess to teach us about our original charter? Levin's astonished look was captured on video as Hannity quickly wrapped up the section. Time is running out. We appreciate the presence of Congressman Mark Levin and Jasmine Crockett. We'll be immediately back following this pause. The damage was already done when the network switched to commercial. Less than 2 minutes, not only had Jasmine Crockett meticulously shattered Levin's reasoning, but the cornerstone of his public image as a constitutional leader. He had revealed his strategies, questioned his knowledge, and contested his core stance on political discourse, all the while keeping her cool and concentrating on the facts rather than insults. The tension in the studio was electric. As Levin tore off his microphone and raced off the stage, crew members avoided making eye contact. Silently, Crockett stayed sitting and collected her documents in a composed manner as producers urgently whispered into their headgear. They were all unaware that social media was already taking off. Snippets of the conversation were being disseminated at a rate that would surpass previous Fox News segment records. The Levin's interruptions and Crockett's poise contrast had produced the ideal visual story. Politicians of all stripes were offering their opinions. Many grudgingly. Recognizing that Crockett had won the exchange handily, regardless of their stance on the issue. In a matter of minutes, the Crockett's cam was trending nationally, according to the hashtag Levin discovered. Calmly and without interruption 18. The purported subject of the program, the constitutional discussion, was mostly forgotten and obscured by the meta-narrative of the actual discussion. As Crockett departed, a junior producer came up to her in the studio. I just wanted to say, Congressman, that was amazing. In my 3 years here, I have never witnessed anyone treat him in such a manner. Crockett gave a small smile. It had nothing to do with managing him. Respecting the audience enough to engage in meaningful dialogue was the goal. They They deserved better than what they received this evening. She omitted to mention that she had arrived ready for precisely the conflict that developed. Each and every file in her folder, each reference to conservative legal authorities, each exact number of disruptions, all of which had been a component of a plan to reveal the Levin's blustery manner belies its hollowness. It wasn't only a debating victory for her. She had meticulously dismantled a character that had ruled conservative media for many years. She was waiting as she walked to her. Her phone was already ringing with messages in the car. Her communications director sent the first one. It's all over. Every network is catching on to it. This will be significant. Crockett didn't answer and put her phone aside. She was aware that what had just transpired would alter not only her professional trajectory but also the character of political conversation in general. It was unclear if such shift would be permanent or temporary. What she was unable to. The extent of the repercussions, which we had not expected. Not only for her own course, but also for the media environment in general and Mark Levin's empire in particular. The altercation between Jasmine Crockett and Mark Levin had evolved into a cultural figure who went beyond conventional political theater. Segments examining the exchange had been broadcast on all major news networks. A deluge of clips appeared on media sites, each one appearing more catastrophic than the last. YouTube compilations with titles. The Constitutional Lawyer School's radio broadcaster was receiving millions of views, and Crockett counted the interruptions. The late-night coverage was continued by the morning shows. The Chiron said on CNN, Constitutional. In the Showdown, Crockett questions Levin's knowledge. MSNBC went one step further. Attorney. Revealed flaws in Levin's legal expertise as a lawmaker. Even the normally favorable terrain of Fox and Friends. Levin clumsily recognized the viral moment while attempting to direct attention on Crockett's policy stances instead of. She dismantled their comrade methodically. The consequences were severe and quick for Levin. His radio program the next day saw him attempting to reframe the interaction, claiming he had been blindsided with out-of-context remarks. In a manner intended to obstruct meaningful conversation. However, the defense was ineffective in light of the video evidence. That was now continuously airing on all media channels. I've argued with the most well-known figures in. Levin urged his radio listeners to be involved in politics for decades. A single edited clip does not alter my record or my level of constitutional knowledge. However, listeners, observe how his tone has changed. The characteristic assurance had given way to a defensive edge that weakened his message. Uncomfortable questions were included in the show's call-ins, which is usually a procession of encouraging voices. Regarding the particular constitutional issues brought up by Crockett. Mark, I'm a big fan, said one caller. However, after researching the Article 3 standing issue she brought up, it appears that she was regarding the test. Could you elaborate on your version? Levin's answer, snipping. Going off the leash and starting a broad conversation about judicial activism only served to further the actions that Crockett had revealed. By the end of the week, the influence had extended beyond responses on social media to real consequences. Due to concerns about being associated with Levin's radio show, major advertisers started discreetly removing their advertisements. What was being described as bullying that was anti-intellectual? Westwood One, which syndicated his show to over 400 stations around the country, stated that a number of significant market affiliates had asked to meet to talk about the future of the program. The following Monday, Fox News delivered the major punch when it revealed a TUR declaration. For the upcoming weeks, Mark Levin's life, liberty, and Levin will not be broadcasting as we make adjustments to schedule for programming. The terminology was instantly recognizable to industry insiders. It was the equivalent of being televised. Sent to the penalty box with a high chance of being benched for life. Levin's reaction was expected. Defiant. He presented the pause as a conscious decision to concentrate on his radio show. On my next book instead of a choice made by the network. However, a different story with Fox was revealed by stolen corporate emails. Executives are worried about preserving their reputation in legal and constitutional debates and the necessity of to reconsider the eligibility of contributors in specific fields. The fallout for Crockett was transforming. The new Congresswoman, a relative unknown when she first arrived at the Fox News studio, representative, was abruptly promoted to a position of national importance. Her office was inundated with demands for interviews. Large-scale publications that had previously disregarded her legislative efforts and now wanted to hear her thoughts on constitutional matters. The effect on Capitol Hill was equally important. Co-workers who had mostly seen Crockett via an identity political prism the youthful. She was now approached by a black woman from Texas who respected her legal knowledge. Permitted tasks that were unexpectedly within reach of Democratic rule after years of securing. Acknowledged her potential as a strong speaker on intricate constitutional matters. 3 days following the altercation. Following the viral moment, Crockett had her first press conference. The space was packed with dozens of reporters, a level of first attorney representatives rarely receive media notice. Prior to that interview, I wasn't searching for she told the assembled press, confrontation. I expected a meaningful conversation concerning constitutional precepts that have an impact on Americans. I'm still more interested in the content than the show. Levin's response to Fox News's question regarding her leave was cautious. I had no intention of influencing anyone's career. I wanted to take our public conversation above and beyond disruptions. And disparages something more important. If that makes room for more considerate voices from all political backgrounds, which benefits everyone. The answer was trait of Crockett's strategy after the aftermath, emphasizing the wider ramifications instead of individual triumph, prioritizing content over show. This position only improved her standing as a serious legislative voice rather than merely a political figure, attempting to attract notice. But behind the scenes, there was no denying the influence on her professional path. Large donors, who started contacting her campaign after previously allocating their funds to more well-known Democrats. Her name was placed to the shortlist for important opportunities by party strategists who focused on developing future leaders. She began to be mentioned by political analysts when discussing prospective senators or perhaps national tickets. The dispute struck a deeper chord with voters and viewers than usual. Political theater, since it appealed to more general dissatisfaction with the status of public debate. Sections for comments showed a startling degree of bipartisan consensus over the exchange. I'm a conservative and, although Crockett was entirely correct regarding the breaks in the content, I disagree with her on policy. One commentator on a YouTube video from Fox News. Even though I've been a fan of Levin for years, this video made me understand how he talks over everyone a lot. If only one person speaks, it's not a discussion, therefore add another. Analysts of the media observed that the altercation had solidified escalating discontent with the screaming match paradigm of. For many years, television news was dominated by political content. We saw more than simply a political figure. Dr. Maria Hernandez, a media studies professor at Columbia, described outwitting a television personality. College. It was an opposition to a certain discourse style that prioritizes noise over content. Not all of Levin's constitutional conclusions were contested by Crockett. She questioned the basic framework of he stands for communication. This study became popular when ratings data surfaced that revealed a minor but noteworthy change in viewing preferences. After the altercation, programs that promoted civil discourse and in-depth conversation saw just slight improvements, whereas formats for yelling heads saw modest decreases. The modifications weren't revolutionary, but they hinted at a possible shift in the preferences of the public. The repercussions for Levin's empire 2 weeks after the viral moment emerged. More precise. Threshold Editions, his publisher, declared that the forthcoming publication of his book would be delayed to allow, requiring modifications and updates, industry code indicating significant marketability issues. Major market radio affiliates started moving his show from popular midday times to less appealing evening hours. And Fox News subtly prolonged his leave of absence permanently. The most detrimental change occurred when, in a statement, the landmark legal foundation, of which Levin had been president for many years, announced his move to emeritus status in order to concentrate on his media obligations. The legal community recognized this as a face-saving removal right away, especially considering his media. Rather than growing, commitments were actively shrinking. Conservative media figures, who differ in their reaction to the fall of Levin. Some people, especially those who have personally dealt with his frequent interruptions, interview manner, provided just rudimentary assistance. Others, particularly the younger, conservative pundits who had pushed for a more thorough examination of constitutional concerns, recognized a chance in the void his retreat had created. Perhaps this is an opportunity for us to improve the conversation, proposed. One of the more prominent conservative legal commentators on her show is Alexandra Carson. We are able to maintain conservative constitutional values without disparaging opponents or oversimplifying difficult legal principles. This opinion became popular among certain conservative viewers who were tired of the bombastic style that has dominated media outlets on the right. There was a hunger evident in the forum debates and comment areas for in-depth research that avoided oversimplifications and catchphrases. I'm sick of. One user on a conservative website said, after watching political shows, I feel like I need a shower. I want to hear real debates on the Constitution rather than just individuals shouting their admiration for it while disregarding what it truly says. After a month, the media landscape had taken in the shock and started to adjust to the recent reality. After Levin's show was removed from dozens of large markets, his radio presence had drastically decreased. Stations. A panel show that specifically promised to replace his Fox News program had been formally cancelled. Polite debate on difficult topics from several angles. Analysts of the industry estimated that Levin's media empire had lost millions of dollars as a result of the altercation. A monetary impact made worse by the serious harm done to his reputation as a constitutional authority. Speaking engagements and appearance fees, which used to fetch 6 figures, have now dropped to a fraction of their former worth. 4. Crockett, the course was exactly the reverse. Her campaign's funding had tripled. Her fan base on social media has exploded. Above all, her legislative agenda now attracted significant attention, especially with regard to voting rights and judicial reform. Co-workers and the media. This is an uncommon instance of substance overcoming fashion in contemporary politics. Political analyst James Richardson was observed. Rockett failed to win because she was more fun and louder. She prevailed because she was more informed, better prepared, and considerate of the audience's intelligence. This view encapsulated the confrontation's wider importance. In a time when political volume was frequently given precedence over substance in communication, but Crockett had shown a different strategy. One that blended strategic patience, courteous interaction, and in-depth understanding. The longest-lasting effect, but might have been based on what the public expected from political debate. Comments from viewers on various platforms showed a reduced tolerance for yelling match dynamics and an increased awareness of disruption tactics. Once dominant program forms were now subject to more scrutiny and criticism. The Levin Crockett, perhaps. The event wasn't about simply two people, media analyst Thomas West said in a extensive analysis. Perhaps it has to do with realizing as a group that we have been embracing a flawed political model. Dialogue. One that puts emphasis on volume over substance, heat above light, and disruption of comprehension. When the dust settled 6 months later, the landscape was forever altered. Levin had backed off to a much smaller platform, airing on a few stations as well as an internet service that requires a subscription. His once significant impact on conservative legal theory had been mostly replaced by speakers with more credentials. Meanwhile, Crockett had become as a prominent figure on constitutional concerns in Congress, and even her detractors appreciate her thorough approach to intricate legal inquiries. Her committee's routine interrogation of executive branch officials and judicial nominees attracted notice for insightful legal analysis that revealed real flaws, not for showmanship, in positions and debates. The altercation that started when Levin kept interrupting had changed in political communication from a viral moment to a turning point. Network news producers now specifically. Moderators were told to enforce the rules against frequent interruptions. More and more viewers indicated a preference for platforms that permitted coherent ideas as opposed to disjointed yelling. Strangely enough, we may owe. In a rare podcast comment on the altercation, Crockett said, "Mark Levin, I owe you a debt of gratitude." Interview. Not for his methodology, but for offering such a lucid illustration of what's our political squabbling is bad. Sometimes you must first observe the issue in its most severe form in order to identify it in its most subdued forms. The observation encapsulated the final irony of the conflict. Levin's profession of interrupting people had been destroyed by his incapacity to put a halt to his interruptions long enough to heed the warning indications of his imminent demise. Additionally, Crockett, who had only requested the chance to finish her thoughts, discovered that this reasonable requests challenged the fundamental nature of politics in ways that went well beyond a single televised segment. Communication in today's world. For viewers who had seen the lesson from the confrontation and its aftermath was obvious. In a political environment where the most vocal, nevertheless, merely demanding the right to speak might occasionally be the most revolutionary action. Complete a sentence. If you thought this analysis of political theater was insightful, please remember to receive more in-depth analyses of the most significant events in American politics, please like and subscribe to our channel. To be the first to know when we publish new content examining the changing terrain of political speech and media, click the notification bell. Your support enables us to keep sharing with you the backstories that the mainstream media won't cover.